Does size matter in your opinion?
So, only 1 in 20 women have orgasms from penetrative sex.
When I buy condoms, should I use the self-checkout?
Balloon fetishes can't have an orgasm or get aroused unless they're touching a balloon, or they can't come unless they hear one pop. The biggest issue is communication. Like the biggest sex problem is that. At the time, there was not one single podcast in the world with the word penis in it. I actually think it's really difficult to be a man today.
Welcome back to the Crooked Smile podcast, brought to you by Maca Media Group. So today's episode we have on sexologist,
very special episode,
sexologist Melissa Hadley Barrett. And just a disclaimer, it's a little graphic with some of the terms we go over, but at the same time, it's a must watch.
It's very important. I think this kind of continues with, I guess, a running theme that we have of stuff that's kind of stigmatized, that we feel like, you know, the demographic that you guys are, the young majority male audience, don't want to talk about. So this is obviously a challenging episode, even just for us, just to talk about this sort of stuff. But Melissa's really great at making it really easy. It's obviously what she does for a living, so she's an expert. A sexpert. But it's very, very, very informative. She has answers to all of our questions.
So if there's anything you want to know about sex, you're in the right place.
Who would have thought, the Crooked Smile podcast?
Let's get into it.
We've gone down this path. Let's get into it.
Melissa, thanks very much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me. It should be fun. I usually speak to much older audiences, so it'll be fun.
Well, that's a good thing, I think. Sorry, we've already kind of talked about it, but I don't know, catering this episode to our kind of demographic, which is mostly 18 to 25-year-olds,
males.
Mostly men. Unfortunately, we're trying to work on the female.
Our huge fan base.
But we are very excited.
I do see lots of patients in that age group, but I usually get invited to speak to an older age group. But I also have grown up children in that age group as well. So them and their friends ask me lots of questions about this stuff.
Right. So, there you go.
So to start
important
with a big question, what is a sexologist?
So most people think that it's like Meet the Fockers, you know, Barbara Streisand, Meet the Fockers.
Oh, that's a strong reference to get off the bat.
My children would probably agree with them that I am like that, or sex education. But no, the job of a sexologist is to help people with sexual dysfunction. And so there's usually 2 different types. My background is I was originally a nurse, and a ED nurse and a midwife and a remote area nurse. And then I went into general practice. And then I studied sexology. So my background is more about what I would refer to as the clinical treatment. So if someone has a physical dysfunction, then I'll deal with that. But I also did postgraduate studies in sexology at Curtin University, and that's all the psych side. So we do both because they're usually not independent. You know, people think that a sexual problem's all in your mind or it's all physical, but it's usually both. And so there's sexologists that are psychology trained, and there's sexologists that are either some sort of medical background.
And I heard on Tackle Talk that sexologists in other countries can be different.
Yes. So I was fascinated about this. I think you must have listened to the episode I did with them. Yeah, there's episodes in some countries actually like sexually engage with their patients. So I just like to say that in Australia, we definitely don't do that.
Good.
And I think the other thing, people think that I get people to come into my office and have sex and I tell them how to do it better. That's not the case. I do couples counselling, but that's more to talk about how they could spice up their sex life or how they could deal with a dysfunctional issue or whatever, or their relationship issue. But I certainly don't. And I make suggestions and, you know, give people positions that might work for whatever their ailment is, but I certainly don't watch them have sex and give them advice on it. Yeah.
Would the job be more fun that way? Or
no, I think it would be really, really,
really
awkward.
Difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to ask, just in general when talking about this sort of stuff, does it just come from, because when we talked to Andrew, he had a really good point about, you know, people thinking, oh, that's weird, like they got fetishes and that's why he studied that. And he just sees it as, you know, this is what I've been doing my whole life. Like he became completely desensitized to that. And obviously lots of people struggle to talk about this stuff and are less comfortable about it. And that's, you know, I guess it's stigmatized and whatever. But is that just from years and years of study? And
I think you just get desensitized. Like I know when I was in general practice, you know, I was always looking in people's ears and noses and toes and all of that. And now I always looked at genitals as well, and now that's all I do. So I don't really notice it. Yesterday, for instance, I saw 15 penises, like I honestly couldn't tell you what one looked like from one to the other. I suppose it's like a gynecologist. You're just desensitized to it. And so probably too much so, because I'm quite sure that I say really inappropriate things at dinner tables. And I know the first time I met my son's partner's family, he gave me the lecture before I went out, which was like, Mum, please don't tell them about what you do at work, and, don't say anything inappropriate. And then I said the word vagina somehow in the table, and then the mother was like, oh my God, cracked up laughing, and Will told me off. And I was like, vagina, like 10 times at the table. And I was in a lot of trouble after that, because I got this big lecture about not saying the wrong thing, and I do. So sometimes I think it probably desensitizes you to the point that you have inappropriate conversations in inappropriate times that you probably shouldn't.
That's not fair. Other people can talk about their work and you can't talk about yours. That's
good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of wanted to start this episode with a segment called Asking for a Friend.
Sure.
Where
we have lots of friends that had some serious questions.
Definitely from friends and not our own questions.
We'd like to.
So,
it's mine first. Okay. Classic one. Does size matter in your opinion?
So, no, size doesn't matter. I think that sex, particularly heterosexual sex, is so focused on, it's so penis-centric, and it shouldn't be. So, only 1 in 20 women have orgasms from penetrative sex. And so how big your penis is really isn't relevant, and it's just about all the other stuff you do. And sex is everything as well as penetration, but it's intimacy and touch and cuddle and kissing and all of those other things, and smells and everything else, and we just get so focused on it. And it's like being focused on a hammer as being the most important part of building a house. It's not, that there's lots of tools that go into that. So, no, I don't think penis size does matter. But I think the biggest problem, and I see a lot of younger guys particularly, and a lot of people who are having an arranged marriage, who will come in before they go back to their country of origin to have their arranged marriage, who have never showed their penis to a partner before and are really worried that they've got a small penis. And they'll literally book an appointment just so I can tell them whether they have a normal size penis. And the average length of a penis flaccid, stretched length, is about 8 to 9 centimetres. I mean, that's not very big. And, and that's full stretch from your pubic bone to the tip. Yeah. And whereas if you look at the research, people actually think it's 15 to 16 centimetres. So
15 to 16?
Yeah.
Even research?
Yeah. Oh. So the research says that that's what men think a normal penis size is, but the actual penis size is 8 to 9 centimetres flaccid. So I think, pornography only picks people at the right-hand end of the bell curve.
Yeah.
So if that's the only way you've ever seen a penis, because in some cultures you don't see your friends or your families, then you go around thinking that there's something wrong with you when you're completely normal.
Yeah, I've done some volunteering with Man Up, which is a men's, youth men's mental health charity, and they use the grading. They just talk about, you think about athletes or whatever, but porn stars are the best of the best, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When it comes to that sort of thing, they're the top, the creme de la creme. So it's a kind of a bad example.
But there also is surprisingly, I actually see a surprising number of men whose penises are too big, and they've had people complain. Having too big a penis is not an advantage. So I don't think
a tough problem to have.
Yeah. So Campbell's been into your practice.
The other thing is, do you know the difference between showers and growers?
Yes.
Yeah. So
is it different? There's an actual
when
number
flaccid,
distance?
you're either a shower
or a grower.
Yeah.
So 70% of men are actually growers, and only 30% are showers. So the guys you see in the change rooms that have it all hanging out and look really impressive, they're the showers, and when they get hard, they don't change much. Whereas growers change. So a grower is someone whose penis gets more than 4 centimetres
the real underdogs.
bigger. Yeah, exactly. So they're like the surprise package, and that's what most men are. So I think it's really sad that men go around their whole life thinking they've had a small penis when they've had a completely normal one. And interestingly, it isn't unusual for guys in their 80s to say, they'll come in for something different like prostate cancer treatment, and they'll say, oh, look, you see lots of penises. I've always wanted to know, is mine a normal size? And I'll just go, what, you've been waiting for 80 years?
80 years to find that out.
Yeah.
80 years of insecurity and crushing.
So no, it doesn't matter at all. But yeah, people seem to think it does.
All right. Asking for a friend, is it normal to last 15 seconds?
So, do you mean before you have an orgasm? Before you?
Yes.
Yep. So anything less than a minute to 2 minutes is considered premature ejaculation, and there's lots of ways you can deal with premature ejaculation. So it's a really common problem. And I don't know, you might want to ask more about that later, but there's primary and secondary premature ejaculation. So if it was 15 seconds, that would be a bit quick for most people.
3-stroke king.
Yeah, it'd be pretty bad. That'd be like Quick Draw McGraw, but there's easy ways. You might be a bit young for that cartoon, but it's
I think so, but it still sounds funny.
Yeah, it's a cartoon that my age group watched. It was called Quick Draw McGraw. Was like a horse that was very quick to draw his guns.
Okay. Right.
So, yeah, you have to put up a photo of that. But, yes, so 15 seconds is probably a bit short because women take, if they're heterosexual, women take a long time to arouse, and if they're same-sex still, that's a very short time. But it's easy to deal with. So there's a lot of treatments for premature ejaculation. So you don't have to just put up with it.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not a disaster.
For my friend.
For your friend, it's not a disaster. Tell him to make an appointment.
Okay.
We'll fix that up for him.
Okay, cool. Well, this kind of links into what we were just talking about, and I can probably already, know the answer. But is sex about the journey or the destination?
Well, I think it's about the journey.
Yeah.
I have a really good slide actually that I use sometimes when I do public speaking, and it's of sexual well-being is the journey, and so it's of you driving along in a convertible car, having fun and laughing.
Yeah.
And the destination is just the orgasm, so it's the fast car doing a burnout. Mm-hmm. And it's much more important about the journey than the goal being orgasm. So orgasm is really good for us because we release all these happy hormones and make us relaxed and sleep better, and it's great for depression and all of those things. But the most important thing that puts humans apart from the animal kingdom, and chimpanzees are in this too, is that is that connection and the touch, and that's all part of the journey.
Yeah. Interesting.
So if you're only there for an orgasm, I mean, you could just masturbate every time and not have anything else.
Lonely man's
point.
world.
Good point.
All right. Asking for a friend. When I buy condoms, should I use the self-checkout?
Or should you just be proud?
Yeah.
It depends what size condoms you're buying. No, I'm teasing. That's just joking. Well, it really depends on your individual need. I mean, you can always order them online if you're that embarrassed. But, it's like buying tampons, isn't it? Everyone, if you feel embarrassed about your bodily functions, then hide them. And if not, just go and buy them.
Be sure to let my friend know that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one more thing about the condoms. If there's a hot person in front of you, then buying a packet of condoms might be
just
like
pick the largest
a bit
size
of a,
possible.
yeah, and it might be a bit of a pickup line, because they might go, oh, that guy's safe. So yeah, might be a good thing.
Safe is attractive.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
It is.
Okay. Should this person leave the lights on, or what's the kind of,
When they're having sex?
Yeah.
Well, most most penis owners are very visual. So, this is a gross generalisation, but it is the way that they're turned on. And most vulva owners are more into sound, hearing and imagination.
Interesting.
So it really does depend on the individual couple or if you're on your own. But, if someone's particularly feeling really self-conscious about their body shape or something like that, then a candle is a good idea because it's a soft light.
Sensual.
It's a bit like putting a filter on.
And it smells nice.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like putting a filter on your, Instagram post.
Mood.
Yeah.
As long as you don't knock the candle over.
Yeah. So a bright light is, and don't want to set fire to your curtains.
Yeah.
A bright light is probably not the best option, but, it really depends on the individual couple, I think, and how awkward they feel. And often I think when couples first get together or, the first time people hook up, I think maybe you just do it in the dark because you're all a bit awkward and fumbling around. And then after that, as you get to know each other better. But certainly visual stimulation adds to the experience.
This is the last one. And this is definitely for a friend, this one. What do you do when she asks, is it in yet?
Oh, I've never been asked that question.
Yeah,
that's a tricky one. Yep, I really don't know. Honestly,
if a patient went to you and asked you, what would your advice be to that patient?
Well, the first thing I would think is that the woman who asked that question is really insensitive. And so I'd be questioning whether or not you actually wanted to
head up king.
Yeah, with that person again, really. Because it seems like, and also I can't imagine ever there actually being a real life situation where
Someone said
a woman couldn't, I can imagine someone would say that, but it would be a pretty insensitive, nasty
It's
thing to
almost
say.
like a movie scene.
But I can't actually imagine a real life situation where someone wouldn't feel a penis inside of them. You know, at the very least you would feel it, even if it was particularly short, you'd feel it at the opening, at the introitus of the vagina. So I think if someone said that, they're probably just being nasty, and I would probably choose them not as a sexual partner in the future.
Good advice.
Good advice to the friend.
Yes.
Get out
I'll
of
make
that
sure to let my
toxic,
friend know
get out
that.
of that.
So moving on from that sort of segment, I wanted to ask, what sort of things do you treat? What are the most common things you have, problems you have from patients coming in?
So erectile dysfunction, I mainly treat men in my surgery. I do see women patients as well, but for some reason there's a lot of people who treat women and there's not many people who treat men. So I seem to treat a lot more men. So erectile dysfunction is the most common. Premature ejaculation, Peyronie's disease. Do you know what Peyronie's is?
It's where it's the bent.
The bent
we talked
penis,
a bit
yeah.
about that with Andrew a little
Yeah,
bit.
wonky willies, I call them. And so that happens for various reasons. That can happen because you actually break your penis whilst you're having sex or masturbating. And I interviewed a guy on my podcast last week who was a porn star actually, and he broke his in 2 places whilst on set.
Is it cartilage though?
It's actually like there's a cylinder around the outside of the. It's called the cavernosal tissue is which gets hard, and around the outside of that is a thing called the tunica. And when you break it, you actually get a tear. It's a really tight, hard, sort of like an inner tire material, and you break that, and then that scar tissue when it's healing, and then you get a bent penis. Yeah. So, and then the other reason it can happen is if you're not getting nocturnal erections anymore, because they're really important for the health of your penis. And if you stop getting those, then you get scar tissue, because all the penis is full of smooth muscle, and all muscles shrink and atrophy. So they get little lumps and plaques in them if they're not stretched all the time. So if you were going to the gym working out and you got a big muscle and then you stopped going for 6 months, then you would get atrophy in that muscle. And that's what happens to your penis if you're not getting nocturnal erections. So a guy your age should be having about minimum of 5 erections a night when you're in REM sleep to keep it healthy.
Does that mean the more sex you have, the bigger your penis is?
No, it just means the more
Well, that's...
Yeah, I get the correlation. It means that the more sex you have, the healthier your penis tissues will
okay.
be. But you are so having more
Damn
sex won't give you a bigger penis, but not having sex or not getting erections will cause your penis to shrink.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can't really make your penis ever bigger than it actually was, but you can get it back to its original form of glory if you've let it shrink over time by lack of use.
And that's a common thing you treat with people that have prostate cancer?
Yes, exactly. Shrunken penises. So back to the question. So Peyronie's, ED, premature ejaculation. I see quite a few people with kinks, like when they're into certain things that are creating problems in their sex lives. So like balloon fetishes, shoe fetishes.
Balloon?
Can we dig deeper into balloon fetishes and shit?
Yeah, so there's a fetish called looners. And that's people who are really into balloons. And so some of them can't have an orgasm or get aroused unless they're touching a balloon, or they can't come unless they hear one pop, or they see a balloon in a kind of a normal situation like at the shopping centre and it makes them feel aroused.
Is that genetic or that's developed?
It's a developed
How do you develop
thing.
that?
So most fetishes, and not all, but most fetishes are developed in early stages when you have your first sexual experience. It forms like an imprint on your brain. So the first time, for instance, that you have an orgasm, there might have been a balloon around for some reason. Or you masturbated into a sock or a shoe when you're a teenager, and then that might become that. Or a common one that I see is men who find it difficult to be faithful to a long-term partner even when they're in love with the person. And when you talk to them about their first sexual experience, it was often clandestine. So they might have had sex with a friend's mother, sister, older sister they shouldn't have, a school teacher, something like that. So their first sexual experience as a young man was in a situation they weren't really supposed to be doing, so it was naughty. So then when they have a long-term loving relationship, it's difficult for them to stay aroused in that situation because it's not clandestine anymore.
The risk isn't there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
How do you treat
That's
that?
fascinating.
So that's really difficult. It's the most difficult. I think number one is just getting people to understand that that's why they feel that way, that they're not actually bored with their long-term partner and that they do love them and that they've got this like initial imprint. And then it's really about making sure that I can make suggestions for them as a couple to keep it exciting. So it might be do it somewhere you might get caught,
Right.
or, do it with the light on and the curtain up or whatever it is. So somehow recreate that situation with your regular partner where it feels a little bit naughty and a little bit clandestine.
Interesting. So next up, we've got some myths versus facts.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of had this when we had Andrew on from Tackle Talk where we talked about myth busting, ball busting.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think of what a good play on words for myth busting, but with, well, I guess you could say a sexpert would be. So we talked about average penis size, flaccid. What's the average penis size when fully erect?
About 14 to 15 centimetres.
So what's the inches converted?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably about 6. That's, erect. Yeah, so it's not that big really, is it? 14 centimetres isn't that long.
And does that change with like the country you're in? Or
Yeah, there is. So there is actually you can Google world map penis sizes. You probably already have. And it actually tells you the average size of penises in the world.
I think I've seen it. Who's top and who's bottom in this,
Now,
without making gross generalizations.
yeah, so the top one is an African country, and I've actually, the name of the country has just gone out of my head, and I've actually seen a gentleman from this country with an extremely long penis. And I was shocked, actually, and I thought, thank God the women are also extremely tall because it wouldn't be, yeah. So I think that was probably a lot less of a problem when people weren't so mobile, but now, So it is true that different, there's certain racial backgrounds that have smaller and larger penises.
Is the G-spot real?
Yes. Yep. It's real. So if you want to know where to find it, you put your finger. So if you have a vulva owner standing in front of you, you'd put your finger into the vagina and then curve it up. So if you put your index finger in and you curve it up, and you'll feel something that sort of feels like, I think it feels like a cat's tongue. It's a little bit sort of ribbed. Mm-hmm. That's the G-spot.
Interesting.
And the G-spot is just part of the clitoris, because the little bit of the clitoral hub that you see on the outside is only a tiny bit, and the rest of it goes inside. Actually, I have a clitoris in my box. Do you want me to show you one?
Let's do it. We forgot to mention that Melissa has brought in an industrial-looking box of props. Oh, there you go.
So that's a clitoris. So this little bit here is all that you see on the outside, and then all of this is on the inside, and then the vagina is like there. So when you put your finger in and hit there, that's like the G-spot.
Okay.
So, yeah, people are often surprised. So actually a clitoris is from the same anatomical tissue as a penis. It's just penis is most of it's outside. It's a bit less discreet. This one's inside.
Kind of looks like a mini penis.
It is, yeah, that's right. I actually have a really good
like the top of it.
Yeah, slide. So this bit here is like what grows into the phallus on a man.
Finding the clitoris is there's a bit of a stigma around finding the clitoris and how hard it can be for people. Is there any advice you would give, once again, to any friends out there that would be needing to know that information?
Needing to know. Well, a clitoris does actually get larger when it's aroused. So, it's sort of like if you imagine the labia on a woman, so you have labia majora and labia minora, it's at the very top of the V. So it's usually there, but everyone's clitorises look different. Some are more out, some are more in, some are quite flat. But usually if you feel that area, you will be able to feel like a little nub of tissue, which is that. But I think the best thing to do is, because people are so anatomically different and clitorises are a little bit more elusive than a penis, is to ask the person who owns the vulva, to show you where it is and what they like, because everyone likes different. Some people like hard, stimulation. Some people like gentle, some like fast, and how are you supposed to know that if the person doesn't tell you, because there aren't any two people the same?
I think there's a general theme with same thing with the lights on, lights off stuff. Do you think people just don't ask that sort of stuff enough? Like, obviously people all think they're masters of sex and think they can just, perfectly know what to do without asking the question. Do you think that's an issue that people have in intimate relationships? They don't ask their partner enough what they personally feel, because everyone's very different.
Definitely. So I think the biggest issue is communication. Like the biggest sex problem is that. And I think when I see couples together, it is usually that, like, they haven't talked about what that person wants. And also you've often had a previous sexual relationship and then you start a new one, and people like completely different things. So, you can't do what you've always done. You have to start again.
To be adaptable.
Yeah. So I think asking is such an important thing. And there's also, some things that really turn on one person, turn other person off. And they might be things that seem, not very important or small to you, but they might be a big thing to them. So if you don't have that conversation, then if you can't talk to someone, you're never going to have good sex. So I always told my children when they were growing up that you should never have sex with someone you don't feel comfortable enough to fart in front of. Because, if I doubt they really took my advice on it, but I always said that. But purely because I think, if you can fart in front of someone and have a laugh about it, not at the same time as you're trying to have sex, obviously.
Yeah, we were going to clarify
clarify that. But, it means that you feel comfortable enough with them to talk about awkward issues. And I think that's the best indicator of whether someone's going to have a good sex life or not.
And do you get people in relationships where one person has an extremely high libido and one has an extremely low libido?
All the time. So it's called, it's where you have incongruent desire. It's a really common problem. And I think the really sad thing there is I think that the person who has the lowest libido is often dragged into the appointment by the person with the highest one. And it's usually the person with the higher libido saying, can you fix them? Because they're broken. They don't want sex as much as I do. And I think there is no right and wrong with how much you want it. It's just about making sure that you can work together on it. And I think the other really sad thing is that the amount of times a couple has sex is often ruled by the person with the lowest libido because the higher libido person's always doing the chasing, the other person's always saying no and then occasionally yes. So I think that's really sad because the person who wants sex 3 times or 5 times a week and the one who wants it once a month, neither of them are wrong, but they need to find a middle ground. So I think when you think about libido, you think about it like a set of traffic lights. Red is, I definitely don't want sex today. It's the grossest idea. Can't think of anything worse. Orange is not really, gagging for it, but if someone offered it and I started getting into it, I'd probably enjoy it. And green is, I really want to do it today. And I think when you're in a long-term relationship, then it's really important that you make an effort when you're in orange because otherwise it's always going to be the person who has the lowest libido that rules the roost. So, and I think the person that's got the highest needs to also understand that red means no go today. So, yeah, but you do have to negotiate it. And also I think that's where masturbation and solo sex is so important. Like if you have a really high libido and your partner doesn't and you want that relationship to work, then you need to, the partner who has a lower libido shouldn't be negative about the other one masturbating regularly because that will keep them happy.
Is it common for guys to be in the position with the higher libido or is it 50-50?
No, I mean, it is usually. When I see couples, it's usually the guy, but not always. Like I'm seeing a couple of young couples at the moment and it's the woman with the higher libido. And I think, so it is more common for it to be the man, but not always. And in same-sex relationships, you see it as well. So it's not like if you have 2 guys or 2 girls that it's any different. There is often, I'm seeing a couple of lesbian couples at the moment where they have mismatched desire.
What are the, I guess, other ways? Yeah, I know you've talked about the traffic light thing, but you can't really change someone's libido, right? Like, is that just a natural kind of
I think,
inclination?
if you think back to when people, like the libido problem usually comes into it when you've been together for a while. It's not usually a problem at the beginning. And I think you need to think back to what made you both be really into it at the beginning. And one was novelty. But the other is when you first start seeing someone, you're usually doing other things apart from sex that are fun. You're usually making a special effort to go on dates that are fun.
The little honeymoon period.
Yeah, and so, you might, so I think that it's about going and having fun doing other things and taking the focus off the sex. So, for instance, if you've been together for a few years, think back to what you did initially and you'll probably find that you tried different things, you might have gone rock climbing or you might have gone 10-pin bowling or whatever just to get to know each other. But you stop doing that when you know each other really well. And if you stop having fun and you stop laughing, it definitely affects your wanting and your libido. So getting a bit of fun back in makes a big difference.
So speaking of relationships, I've heard that when you meet your partner, say a male meets a female partner and the female partner's on birth control, and then sometime down the track of the relationship, the female comes off birth control and then the natural hormones come back to the female and they're no longer attracted to their partner. Is that real?
Sounds like a horror movie.
It is. It does sound like a horror movie. Look, I've read those studies as well, and they're not conclusive. But what does happen when a woman's long-term on the pill is if you're on a combined pill, you're taking estrogen and progesterone, and the estrogen binds to the testosterone, and it lowers your libido naturally. And it does change your hormone makeup and, your pheromones to a degree. And when a woman is cycling normally, that's when they find people more attractive in certain stages of the cycle. So it does make a lot of scientific sense that it could have that effect. And there is research for and against it. But definitely it changes your libido. So I think, there is a risk that you might be involved in a relationship where it seemed like you had a match of a libido and then someone goes off a contraceptive pill and then suddenly that changes very much.
And what are the ways you can, for your sexual health, improve your libido?
So exercise is really important. So when we exercise, we give ourselves all those happy hormones that make us feel sexy. You also feel better about your body. And you get more oxygen supply to your genitals. So the more oxygen supply you get, the healthier they are. That's for clitorises and penises and everything. And they get more blood flow, and more blood flow means they're more aroused. You'll get more erectile function. For a guy, you wake up in the morning and you see you've got an erection every day, you're much more likely to go, oh, that's right, that'd be fun to use that, than you are if it's a floppy noodle every morning.
We had a few more myths there, but I think I'm more interested in some of the ones that you have written down here, some of the usual myths that you see.
Well, do you want me to tell you some of them that I thought? I was like, that masturbation is bad. So, masturbation is really good for you, Okay. And I don't think it's such a big problem with maybe your generation, but with mine, it's certainly, you'd grow hair on your palms, your penis would fall off, women never masturbated, all of those things. So I think masturbation is really good for you, I think it's important that if you don't know what feels good for yourself, how are you going to know how are you going to explain to someone else what feels good? Yeah. And also, you never go food shopping when you're on a diet, because you'll buy the chocolate at the, checkout on your way out. And I think if you're a single person, you shouldn't go out looking for a partner when you're sex starved, because you'll bring home the bad chocolate, So if you, if you go out and you're looking to meet a partner, or you're looking to, find someone to have sex with, if you're really horny and you're desperate to have an orgasm, you're much more likely to make a poor choice, aren't you? Yeah. So I think, if your sexual satisfaction is being achieved in other ways on your own, then you're more likely to be a little bit more discerning about the people you choose to have sex with. So I think masturbation is really good.
Does alcohol influence that decision as well?
Definitely. I mean, there's the whole beer goggle thing, isn't there? That, and the interesting thing with alcohol is you have one or two and you become hornier. And then once you get past that, you usually lose it. So we think that, alcohol is a aphrodisiac, but it's actually not. It's just because in the bit that you remember drinking it, it feels like it, and then that goes away.
So with our podcast, we've had a lot of episodes where we've kind of tied in the theme of physical versus mental health.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting to discuss with like arousal and having sex, and especially ED, the physical versus mental side of things.
Yeah.
You said before it was a mix.
Yeah, it is definitely a mix. So, I mean, you can get erectile dysfunction for a number of reasons, and a lot of them are physical, so not enough blood supply to the penis, your nerves that are around the outside of your prostate have been damaged from lower back injury or surgery or whatever the case, but medications can cause it, all sorts of things. But the other side is as, if you, for instance, you had brewer's droop, you drank too much one night and you were with someone and
brewer's
droop. What do you got? Did you call it earlier? Whiskey dick.
Whiskey dick, I think is the youth way of saying that. But
brewer's droop is what we used to call it.
That's great.
So, you'd get, you might be about to have sex, you have an erection and then it goes away because you've drunk too much alcohol, or because you just feel anxious because you're with a new partner. So there's a really interesting correlation between anxiety and erectile dysfunction, and they sort of feed into each other. So in cavemen times, you were in the cave, you were having sex, and a lion came in to attack you. So you can't really run away or fight a lion with an erection. It's pretty difficult. So you get a rush of adrenaline in flight, your penis goes down and you can do that. But
that's hilarious.
So But what happens now is we're not chased by too many lions. So, you might have a physical reason on a particular day why your penis won't work. But then the next time you go to have sex, that fleeting thought is going to go through your head. Oh, I hope it works today.
The lines are in the head.
The lines are in your head. You get a rush of adrenaline and your penis goes down. So you end up in this kind of cycle of a problem. So I think of it like adrenaline to your penis is like kryptonite to Superman.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's weird to think, because you think you would get adrenaline in situations where you're having sexual experiences, right? Because like any other time you get adrenaline, it's like,
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the main hormones that you get when you're like aroused are oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine, and cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is actually lowered when you're aroused, which is a good thing, which is why you feel better after you've had an orgasm. So, yeah, I think there is a definite correlation, and so often the problem starts off physical and then becomes mental. And I also think it's a bit sad because often I'll see guys who go, I haven't done anything about this problem and I've had it for a year or two because I just thought it was all in my head. And, it often isn't, it ends up all in their head, but it starts off with a real problem.
For our demographic, our age of people, what would be the best way you'd recommend for us to use contraception?
So it's tricky. It's really, condoms are great because obviously they prevent STIs as well.
Yep.
And, if you put them on at the right time and all of those, they're really effective. But let's face it, most people don't put the condom on until after they've had a bit of pre-cum, and pre-cum has millions of sperm in it. So,
right.
There's always that issue. So condoms are good. Never, ever, ever use the withdrawal method. Like young people
Pull-out game.
all the time tell me they're using the pull-out game.
God.
It's like,
young people are so arrogant.
It's fine. I just do that. And I'm like, actually, one of my friend's daughters said that to me the other day, and I was like, no. Your mum's going to be a grandma soon. I think long-acting contraception for women is the best. There really isn't, and apart from condoms, there's nothing effective yet for men. But for women, long-acting contraception, which is either an IUD or an implant-on rod that goes in your arm, because they're progesterone only, so you don't have that problem of the estrogen binding to your testosterone, so it doesn't affect your libido. And you don't have to worry about them. Doesn't matter if you drink too much one night and spew, you're not going to lose your pill. If you get sick, get diarrhea or something, it's not going to affect it. So it really is the most reliable. Some people have side effects to long-acting, but very few. So I personally think they're definitely the best way to go. And I think also that's another myth, actually, is that if women don't have regular periods, that's a problem for their long-term fertility. That's absolute rot, So, if you use a Mirena, for instance, or a Kylena, which is a different IUD for young women, or an implant-on, which is one of those rods that go in your arm, you probably won't have regular periods. And that's perfectly fine. That isn't affecting your long-term fertility in any way.
So porn.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about how it affects relationships, men in particular, and their ability for ED and that sort of thing. What's your opinion
on porn? So I think there's nothing wrong with porn. I just think it's like everything, it's in moderation. So porn can be a good thing to watch as a couple even, if you're into it. If you're both into it and you both find a type of porn that turns you on, watching that can be helpful, as long as you don't need it every single time to have a good time. And I think it's the same with anyone watching porn for masturbation. Like, it's fine if you're doing it every now and then. It's just as long as you mix it up. You just don't want to get to a situation where you have a porn addiction, and a porn addiction is where you have to watch it every day, a lot of times a day. It's interfering with your daily life, and you can't become sexually aroused unless you're watching porn. So I think the disadvantage is it's like drugs. You can have a gateway, so you can watch something like vanilla sex, and then you can keep going up and up and up in the sort of intensity of the porn and what people are doing. And if you do that, then you might find normal sex with a partner unarousing. So it's really about the type of porn you watch, how often you watch it, but it can be used in a positive way and a negative way. The big disadvantage, I think, with porn is that, for men, is when they're masturbating, they're usually masturbating with their hand. And if you're masturbating with your hand all the time, you can get something that's called a death grip.
I was going to ask, because you talked about...
You've got the prop.
I've got the prop here for that one.
I was going to ask how we could implement that. But
So You have, this is Jeffrey, for anyone watching. Jeffrey's my penis, and Jeffrey is not a normal size penis, I just like to say. He's big and intimidating. It's just you can't buy dildos that are small, unfortunately.
Why is that? That's rubbish.
It is rubbish. They need to make real life dildos, I agree. And also I'm a bit attached to him now. I've been carrying him around for about 9 years, so I can't get rid of him.
Wow.
And this is a sex toy, and it's called a pulse duo, but there's lots of things like this. You would have heard of fleshlights, and there's all sorts of different things.
Yep.
The problem when you're masturbating with your hand is that you'll do it really tight and at no vagina. So if you're a heterosexual guy or bisexual and you're having sex with vaginas, then it's never going to be that tight. Doesn't matter how many Pilates classes we do, it's never going to be like a hand grip. So if your penis gets used to that really tight hand grip, it's not going to be able to come when you're inside of a vagina. So that is probably the biggest problem that I see with porn. So I think when people are masturbating, they should preferably use something. Sometimes you can use your hand, but make sure it's not too tight. But, in the heat of the moment, you get a bit tighter. But something like this, you pop your penis into it.
The live demo.
I don't know if Jeffrey's going to...
I won't turn him on. He fits in his all the time. And then you use that as a masturbation device. It also has a little vibrator that vibrates on your frenulum, which is this part of your penis.
Okay.
And that's the equivalent of the clitoral nub. So that's anatomically the same. So that's why that's the most sensitive part of a penis.
It's expensive.
You can tear your
masturbation
frenulum as well.
Yes,
I've
can.
known people that have torn theirs. Yeah. It's quite nasty.
You can tear it. It bleeds a lot. It's a bit like a head injury, but they heal fine. Yeah, they're okay.
Yeah, okay.
So like this bit here is the equivalent of this bit here.
Okay.
That's why it's so sensitive. Yeah.
Right.
So one of, but yeah, I mean, most sex toys nowadays, you can buy a decent, masturbator like that for like a couple of $100.
Is it common for couples to use sex toys?
Well, I don't know really. It's common in my patient cohort because I recommend them. I think sex toys can be just a really good way to spice up a long-term relationship. And also if you have sexual dysfunction, then there's, if someone has anorgasmia, so problem having orgasm, then sex toys can be helpful, particularly for women, for clitoral stimulation. This one in particular has a motor in there for the penis and a motor there that the partner uses a little remote control and that vibrates on the vulva. I think they're great. And I think in younger couples, they're probably more common than they are in older couples. The older couples that I hear will often go, I've never bought a sex toy before, but maybe I'll try it. I've got a sex toy shop online of just things that I think are really good.
We'll leave a link in the description.
Thanks. And I only started that. I only started that because companies send me sex toys all the time to try, which surprisingly gets a little bit boring. So I have to give them to my kids and their friends. Here, try these and give me a review. But also, I think that it's really embarrassing for a lot of people to go into a sex shop. So I think and also you go onto like a big website with thousands of what do you buy? Like how do you know what a good sex toy is? So I think it's good to have ones that have been tried and tested by someone and that you can buy and they get delivered to you.
I wanted to talk about, because I heard you mentioned earlier that 1 in 20 women only have clitoral orgasms. So how important are orgasms for couples when having sex?
Well, I think it's a bit what we mentioned before is that shouldn't be the end game. I think it's about enjoying the journey. So if you have an orgasm, great. But if you don't, then try not to focus on it. And I just think the main thing is that people are often hung up, and you see this a lot in social media about, did you have an orgasm at the same time? Well, does it really matter if you have an orgasm at the same time?
Orgasms in sync.
Yeah, it's such a Hollywood sex thing, isn't it? It takes 5 minutes for a man to get from no arousal to being able to have an orgasm. It takes the average woman 20 to 25 minutes. So, chances of that happening simultaneously are pretty slim, particularly, young guys just need to know that it takes 20 to 25 minutes. They got to spend a lot of time on foreplay before they can have an orgasm if they have any hope of it happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that the answer to that is that it should be that you both have a really nice time and enjoy being with each other and the touching and all the other sensations, and it's not all about orgasm. And I think it's important for people to know that only 1 in 20 women have vaginal orgasms because we do need to pay a lot more attention to the clitoris, And I think that's the other important thing about women in particular having masturbated, so they know what feels good, or, it's not always easy when you're having penetrative sex for the other partner to touch the clitoris. So you need to maybe do that yourself or use a sex toy or something like that. And for the female and the male partner not to feel like they've failed if they haven't got that person to have a vaginal orgasm, because it just isn't possible for most people.
And the bonding chemical released when couples do have sex?
Is oxytocin. So it's the same one that a woman releases when we breastfeed a baby. So, you know, you have your baby can keep you up all night, you know, it wakes up and you think in your head, I hate that kid, wish it would go back to sleep. You put it on your boob, you release oxytocin and it looks beautiful even though it's the 10th time that night you wake up.
Right.
That's what happens when we have sex.
Yeah, okay.
Does that, because this is going into venturing into more relationships, does that make it very difficult for people to have no strings attached, friends with benefits type relationships, do you think? Or because having that connection is obviously very intimate and you know, people like to think that they can.
We're getting very deep.
This is very, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, look,
obviously
it's
different
really
different
controversial,
people.
and I'm sure there are people out there that can have no strings
Just be
attached
completely
sex,
withdrawn.
But I actually think that's rare. I
Yeah.
think most people, when they say they have friends with benefits and
lying.
it's just sex, aren't really telling the whole truth.
Yeah.
Because most people, I think for 99% of people, sex is much better when you have a connection with them. And if you're friends, you usually actually like each other, and then you're having sex. Are you really friends with benefits, or are you actually having a relationship? Because the
with
fact
just no title on
you're
it.
just having, you're just not a entirely, and you also might have you might have that situation with more than one person.
It's just a non-exclusive relationship.
But it doesn't really mean that you have no feelings for that person.
So what are your thoughts on promiscuity versus monogamy then?
Well,
Here we go.
Controversial.
Yeah, no,
We're jumping all over the
that's
place.
okay.
here,
So my personal opinion is I think whatever works for you. So
Yeah, okay.
I think if you want to have sex with more than one person, as long as you're safe and you're not spreading diseases, go for it. And as long as you're doing it for the right reason,
and
which
you're not
is
hurting people.
Yeah,
I feel,
yeah, exactly. And as long as you're doing it because you genuinely want to have sex with more than one person, you're not doing it because there's a hole in your heart or your self-esteem is low and it's making you feel better, you know? So I think it's about going back to why am I having sex with lots of different people? And if you are, also that you're really open with all those different people, that you're having sex with other people, you know? So it's back to that whole clandestine thing. If the thing that's getting you aroused is because you're doing something naughty, then that's probably hurting someone else. So I think, if you choose to have sex with more than one person, that's perfectly fine as long as you're open, honest and safe. And you're not just open and honest with other people, but you're open and honest with yourself, that you're doing it because you genuinely want different sexual experiences with other people and not because you're trying to fill a hole somewhere.
I'm very intrigued by one more prop, and it's looking like something from one of my dad's favourite movies. And there's one
Is that
of my
Austin
favourite
Powers?
movies. Yeah, is that the Swedish-made penis enlarger there? Is that the sort of thing, the one Swedish-made penis enlarger for Austin Powers?
I'll show you. So, this is a penis pump. This one is actually made by a South African person.
Oh, okay.
But penis pumps don't actually make your penis enlarged. So that's absolute
They
crap.
just draw more blood.
But
into
what
it.
they do
Yeah.
is they exercise your penis. So when you use it, it's just a vacuum. You put your penis in. Jeffrey only just fits in here because he's a bit big.
Holy cow, Jeffrey doesn't need any more.
And he doesn't need any enhancement. When you pump it, it just sucks the blood into the penis and then you hold it erect and then you release it. And they also have rings that go on the base to hold that in there. So they're quite good for people with erectile dysfunction because you can pump it up instead of using drugs, and then you hold a ring at the bottom and it just traps it like a tourniquet. The only problem with that is you end up with an erection that looks like, this, and it's like a lamb's tail and you're just not
that
getting any
painful?
blood flow. It's not painful, but you're not getting any blood flow, so you get like a blue shaft and it's cold to touch.
Oh,
And then look, it's better than not being able to get an erection at all, but there's certainly much better ways to get an erection if things aren't working than a
Okay.
penis pump. But what they are good for is if you don't have those nocturnal erections we were talking about to keep your penis healthy. It's like physio for your penis. So
Yeah.
I sell hundreds and hundreds of these every year, different ones, these ones and another couple that I've got on my website. And they're absolutely perfect if you've got Peyronie's disease or you've lost your erectile function and you need to keep it healthy. So during COVID, a lot of young guys were getting ED, not getting nocturnal erections anymore. So whilst we were waiting for those problems to heal with time, then a penis pump is a great way to make sure you don't get a shrinking penis, but it's not going to make your penis bigger like on Austin Powers.
Was that just because
Inflammation,
yeah. Yeah.
But the COVID thing, was that just because people weren't exercising, weren't getting outside enough?
No, because it's so
inflammation.
it causes inflammation, and it was causing some people were getting it in.
Oh, COVID itself.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So I saw quite a lot of young guys that would come in. You know, like the youngest was 16. I actually interviewed him on my podcast, and he got COVID day 4 of getting COVID. He woke up and panicked, and thank God he had a good relationship with his mum. Went in and said, "Mum, I haven't been getting an erection for the last few days. There's something wrong."
Wow. Switched on 16.
And well, I think it's just so good that he had such a great relationship with his parents that he could tell them, because he was really worried about it. And it took a good 6 months to get them back.
I don't think I would have that conversation.
Yeah. So penis pumps have a place. They are great. And I've got lots of YouTube videos on penis pumps on my YouTube channel, so you can check that out.
Link in description.
Link in description.
We
We'll link
might
everything
we
in the
might have the
description.
most clicked on the sex store. And, if only we can get some website data and see who was clicking on each.
YouTube.
Yeah.
We can work that out.
So speaking of your podcast, you have a podcast called The Penis Project,
Yep.
which is very popular. And how
Yes.
many episodes are you up to now?
I think it's 169 this week.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So did you want to tell the audience a little bit about
Yeah, so I originally started the podcast just over 3.5 years ago now with a physiotherapist called Joe Milios, who does men's health. And we started it together during COVID, actually, because we had a situation where we would always have patients who had a particular problem. Then we'd get someone else in with the same problem. And I'd go, wouldn't it be great if we could mix those two people up and someone, because it's, a problem when someone else has it is so much better, and men don't often talk about these things. Mm-hmm. So I felt like we were always drawing back to this one person, like to ask them. So then Joe and I were chatting, and we were like, well, why don't we record them just for our patients? So that's what we did. We started recording patient stories, and it was just, we thought only our other patients would listen, but it kind of went absolutely nuts. So we've got like hundreds of thousands of people listen all the time now, and we get at least 3,000 to 5,000 downloads every episode. And then that's because they're evergreen, they just keep growing all the time. And we've got like a worldwide audience now. Interesting, mainly the UK, because it's recommended. The podcast is recommended by the Prostate Cancer Foundation in the UK.
Wow.
New Zealand, Canada, America, a lot of Israelis for some reason when I have a look.
Because they think sexologists.
They think we have sex, yeah. And also that probably explains why I get asked to be people's friends on LinkedIn all the time by Israeli men. Probably explains it. But yes.
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah, so that's not how it works in Australia. But yeah, so it's just gone crazy. It's like really good. So the first few episodes, I was useless. I had no idea what I was doing with the time. No, with the sound, nowhere near as good as you. But my husband was frustrated listening to it, so he got me some decent equipment. So now it sounds a lot better the last probably year and a half. And Jo doesn't do it with me very often anymore. She only does the odd one every now and then. But I've interviewed lots. Like last week it was the porn star, and the week before that was an older guy who got a penile implant, surgically implanted. I've interviewed quite a lot of Andrew Tan's patients on there.
Yeah, right.
Next week is a really wonderful sexologist from over east, Victoria Cullen, from a thing called Touchy Subject. I interviewed someone about mismatched desires in New York. So there's a combination of patient stories and other specialists. So yeah, it's good. And
how do you come up with the name?
The Penis Project.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty obvious,
Very bold,
isn't it?
but
Well,
good for marketing.
It is. Well, I wanted to call it the Willy Whisperer because my brother
Oh, that's actually better.
calls me the Willy Whisperer. But Jo, she was quite rightly, she did a little Google, and she was like, at the time, was not one single podcast in the world with the word penis in it. So we were like, okay, what do we do? So that's why we came up with the Penis Project.
It seems like it worked pretty well.
And it worked really well. And I think there is one other podcast now called the Penis Podcast, which is also from someone in WA, actually.
Come on.
But
If you're watching
beef.
Penis Podcast, people, we are not fans.
Bit of podcast beef.
yeah, but it's fine. I've actually interviewed him on my podcast, and I've been on him, so it's okay.
No beef there.
No beef there.
We
But
love-
yeah, so I think just having the word penis in it was quite good. The only problem is on Instagram and stuff, we have to put a little star where the E is, otherwise it gets knocked off. And then I don't know if you've seen the logo. It's a hammer and 2 bolts, nuts and bolts.
I've seen the Spotify one where it's just the writing.
Oh, it's just in Spotify. It's gone black, but yeah, it's supposed to. You can see it in Apple.
Too sensitive.
My daughter drew it. So, yeah, I gave it to her. I was like, Mads, I wanted a sausage and 2 eggs. But she was like, no, I've got a much better idea. It means you nailed it. So that was why it's that.
So is there anything else just in general you wanted to talk about or tell our demographic that you think would be valuable?
There are a few more myths in there that I thought were really interesting when you read that. That we might
What
have
other
to-
ones? Oh, I think the other interesting one is that the amount of lubrication, like how wet a woman is, isn't necessarily how turned on she is. So
Interesting.
I think there's a big myth about lubricant,
Yeah.
like, oh, you don't know, because guys say this all the time, oh, we don't need lube, like she gets really wet, which is kind of like a badge of honour for them because they've
They
aroused
think
her
they're
enough.
legend alert. Yeah.
Yeah. But some people just get wetter than others. It's like some people have wetter eyes than others, And also some people don't get as wet, but it doesn't mean they're not aroused. So lubricant, I think, is absolutely brilliant. And also, like, I think it improves sensitivity. It just makes sex better. And so, you should at any age, I think lube's sort of something that old women need, but at any age, lube is definitely going to make sex
Well,
more
they
sensitive
come in the
and
condom
better.
packets nowadays.
Oh, good.
Some of them have a
Do
couple
they?
little lube sachets.
Yeah,
in
there you
them.
go.
Well, if we get in the same brand, I don't know.
The friend who bought them told you. Yeah.
Yes, my friend told me
yes.
actually.
So Mum and Dad watching that.
So-
I'm too scared to buy condoms at a store, obviously.
So I think that's really important, is that like lube is not a bad thing and the amount of wetness doesn't indicate. Oh, there's also the whole issue of squirting. Is it real?
I'll be interested to know to tell my friend.
Yeah, your friend. So women, women have a thing called the Skene's glands, and in the Skene's glands, it's like the equivalent of a prostate for a man. And so when a woman has an orgasm, they can have an ejaculation from the Skene's glands, but it's only a few mils, and it's a milky fluid that you can. It is different to urine, but it isn't a lot. So, when you're watching porn and women are like squirting
Is that fake?
everywhere, it's probably fake on porn, not always. But there is a thing called squirting, which does come from the bladder. So when you get really aroused, and it's usually arousal, not orgasm, that people would squirt, it is a release from the bladder. And people say, oh, that's not true, it's not. But it is, because they've proven it. They've put dye in the bladder and then they've given it to women who squirt and it comes out of the bladder. So with the dye in. So that's what it is.
And
But
every woman can squirt, or is that like a 1 in 20 orgasm
I
thing?
don't know the statistics. I haven't done enough research on it, but it's not like common. And also it doesn't mean that someone who squirts has a better orgasm than someone who doesn't. So I just think there's, a whole lot of stuff online about, how do you make a woman squirt and all this. It's irrelevant. It's about the journey, and that's just
Not the destination.
not the destination.
Not the destination.
And squirting is not an
Wow.
indication that the destination is any better.
Anything in particular do you think that young people
I think
have got no idea about?
Premature ejaculation was a good one. I
Yep.
think there's 2 types. One is primary, which means that from you're born basically with coming less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that I've definitely noticed, and this is purely anecdotal, a correlation in different cultures. There seems to be that people from the Middle East are the most commonly coming into my clinic with premature ejaculation. That's primary. And when you have premature ejaculation, no amount of technique, stop-start technique is going to stop that.
Yeah.
So you really need medication for that, and medication works really well. Then there's secondary, which might just be because you've met a partner that you're really turned on by, or makes you feel really anxious because you really want to impress them, and then you come too fast. And so, or you might just have, secondary premature ejaculation because you're having a particularly stressful period of time, or it's been ages since you've had sex. And so that type of premature ejaculation can be dealt with by like masturbating before you go and have sex with a partner, so that it's your second time that day and you've got a bit of a refractory period going on. Or there's a technique called the stop-start technique. Or there's a really good spray that desensitizes the penis called Steady Freddy. Also, there's a link to that on my website. It's a great name.
Steady Freddy.
Do Kegels?
And
Training Kegels
yeah,
work?
training your Kegels, your pelvic floor can definitely help.
Sorry, what?
So
I don't know what that is.
You'd probably explain this better than me.
So your Kegels are your pelvic floor muscles. So everyone, men and women, have a basket of pelvic floor muscles that hold your organs inside your body. And when a man and a woman has an orgasm, the sensation we get is from them contracting. So the stronger your pelvic floor, the more intense your orgasm. So lots of men who have their prostate out, who have to work their pelvic floor so they don't leak wee everywhere, will go, it's weird, my orgasm's better than it's ever been ever in their life, and it's because they've been training their pelvic floor.
So sit-ups?
No.
That doesn't work.
So
The feeling of sucking your nuts up into your stomach.
your nuts
Okay,
to your
yeah,
guts.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the best
yeah.
way to know if you're doing a pelvic floor exercise is stand naked in front of the mirror, and if you can wave your penis at the mirror, if it's waving at you when you're lifting the pelvic floor. So it's not your abdominal muscles, it's just your pelvic floor. And if you listen to episode 4 of the Penis Project, Joe Milios talks you through doing a pelvic floor exercise for a man. Probably the other one is, and you'll hear this on my TEDx, is that, people think men cheat because they're bastards or they're promiscuous or whatever. I don't believe that. I think most men cheat because they're lonely.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's really difficult for it to be a man today, particularly a young man. I think...
We're talking about that with Lloyd on last week's
Oh,
episode
were you?
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't listened to Lloyd's and I really want to. But I think it's really difficult. Like, I think, if you're a young guy, it's like, do I hold the door open? Do I offer to pay for dinner? Or is that going to be seen as...
Is chivalry dead?
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? And I think, you can take one girl out and she'll be upset because you invited her out and you wanted her to go halves in the bill, or, I don't know. I just think it's really difficult. There's no set rules anymore. And it's like, I hate the phrase toxic masculinity. Like, I think being masculine, women and men have masculine and feminine traits, and we should embrace them both. And we should, there's nothing wrong with having masculine traits. They can be a really good thing. And so I don't like the word toxic masculinity. And
I really like that.
Yeah. I think it's really hard for young guys to know where they stand. And also from a sexual perspective, women definitely respond better to men who are more assertive in the bedroom. And so we expect men, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, to be the initiator and to be more assertive in that area. But then we expect them to be more like equal or stand back-ish in every other area of life. So how confusing is that for a young guy? So I just think it's really hard to be a young man now.
Thank you for your sympathy. No.
Really appreciate
I can
it.
see that. It's an interesting conversation because, that kind of balance between being respectful and
Assertive.
I don't know.
Confidence.
The confidence.
The confidence, arrogance, aggression sort of fine line is really hard to navigate in today's age.
It's really, really hard. And then, I do see young couples where heterosexual couples where the female will go, I just wish he was a bit more assertive or a bit more aggressive, so to speak, in the bedroom. And I'll go, but do you want him to be that when it's talking?
He's probably just a nice guy.
In normal life? And she'll go, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how's he supposed to know that he's in trouble when he's assertive
Yeah.
in day-to-day life, but you want him to be like that in the bedroom unless you can negotiate that and talk about it. So I think
Comes back to communication.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to talk about that.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and it's really good to get some actual advice.
And dispel so many myths because
many myths.
The reason why there are myths
And help
is because
out our
people don't
friends that
talk
have so
about
many
it.
questions.
And to you, our friends that are listening to this, well, you're welcome because we stood here and we asked the big questions.
So
even though they don't relate to us.
So where can the audience find you?
So they can go onto any podcast app and listen to the Penis Project. Or I have 2 websites. My clinic website is rshealth.com.au, and then Men's Health is Melissa Hadley Barrett. And I've got Instagram and Facebook and YouTube under both of those as well.
Perfect. So we'll leave all those in the link below for you guys. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching to the end. And Melissa, thanks very much for coming on. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Pleasure.
That's
Thanks
great.
very much for having me.
Thank you.
See ya.